we're going to go right over there. I'm going to lower it so I can put it right in front of my face. Okay. So if I move here and lower it one more. Or no. How's that? Yeah, it's about my head. I like this much better. You know what I should do?
Actually,
I mean, you can. It's like a 3D movie.
Yeah, great. It's Brian made the right choice.
We need to make sure we have a seat for that when it comes back. Something back. I moved. No, we tried it and Mary Beth didn't like it.
Everybody just got so quiet. Oh, fun. How about a tap dance? I think each candidate should do a tap dance.
you do your opening.
Yes.
Around the way.
You still have a problem with the money?
Oh, I think I got it.
There you go.
I think it works. Got it. It's a very, very small red button on the bottom.
Good evening. Welcome to Maple Grove. We're so excited to have such a big crowd at the north end of CD3. I'm Nancy Meyerhoff. I'm the chair of Senate District 34, and we're happy to co-sponsor the Congressional District 3 Candidate Forum tonight. Our candidates are Brian Santa Maria, Dean Phillips, and Adam Jennings. And our moderator is our own Katie Rodriguez from the Met Council. So welcome, and I hope you learn the answers to your questions and think about which candidate you want to have go up against her also. Thank you.
Thank you. How's the sound on this? Can you hear me? Good. Okay. So, wow, Maple Grove really loves its community center. I felt like I had to park in Plymouth to get here. Again, welcome to DFL Senate District 34. My name is Katie Rodriguez, and I was appointed by Governor Dayton to represent District 1 on the Metropolitan Council. It's 11 communities, but I think it's best described as Dayton, Maple Grove, and Plymouth, and then west to the Hennepin County border. There are 16 of us council members, and we represent the roughly equal in population geographic districts throughout the 7-county metropolitan region. And our chair serves at large. Even though the Met Council is in the paper all the time, people really don't know what we do. My colleague likes to describe it as buses, flushes, parks, and housing. First and foremost, we are a planning agency, and we provide a lot of the demographic stats that you see in the newspapers. For example, we expect to have 750,000 people, more people in the region, the 7-county region, by 2040. We also do the 30-year plans that guides the smart growth for transportation, water, wastewater, parks, and housing. We also work with cities like Maple Grove and help them on their long-term plans. We are also Metro Transit, so we provide 90% of the transit rides in the region, and we treat 90% of the wastewater in the region. And here's a little known fact: we save you money every day. Because we provide those services region-wide, we provide them at cheaper rates. And for example, for the wastewater, you all pay 40% less than your peers in your wastewater rates. So my background is public finance, and I live in Maple Grove with my husband and my youngest daughter. My oldest daughter is in London studying abroad, lucky girl. Back to tonight. I understand this is your 5th forum, so these guys are pros, but I'm gonna go over the ground rules for me and for you all. You have 2 minutes each for opening and closing, and for each of the questions. There will be 30 seconds to rebut if there's any personal attacks, but you all aren't going to do that because that might confuse me. Amy is our timekeeper, and she'll let you know if you're running out of time and when to stop. The candidates did receive the questions prior, but I have a fun moderator question, and we'll get to that after the opening. I will ask for opening statements in alphabetical order, and then I'll do closing statements in the reverse, and then I'll try and mix it up during the other questions. So, opening statements, 2 minutes, Mr. Jennings.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for coming out this evening. Certainly Nancy Meyerhoff, thank you for hosting, and Councilmember Rodriguez, thank you for moderating, and the work that you do at the Met Council. We work pretty closely with the Met Council. I sit on City Council at Tonka Bay. What you guys do is great. I contend that here in the 3rd District, we don't have an issue getting Republicans to vote for Democrats. We have an issue getting Democrats to vote for Democrats. It spills out in the numbers. You can see it. You've got Obama, who won it in both cycles. Hillary Clinton absolutely crushed it when she ran against Donald Trump. She beat him by 10 full percentage points. But more importantly, the legislative seats across the district are Democratic seats, and these aren't even necessarily moderate Democratic seats. Now, I don't think we win by pandering to Republicans. I think we win if we stand by core Democratic principles and values, and we put together a policy based on that. I think we should have Medicare for all, public education, and we specifically need to make sure that we're not spending public tax dollars or sending public tax dollars to charter schools. And finally, a $15 an hour mandated federal minimum wage. Now, I've held my union card. I have my MBA from in finance from the Carlson School of Management. I went on to manage a $9.2 billion portfolio. I currently sit on City Council. I served in the Minnesota Army National Guard for 8 years, was deployed. I'm a father, a husband, a deacon at my church, and a small business owner that helps provide transitional housing to homeless vets. Being a Democrat to me it's not a theory, and it's not an intellectual exercise. And I get concerned that if I had to do it all over again today, I couldn't, because we are under attack right now, and we need to do everything that we can to stand up and fight back against that. Thank you.
First name alphabetical or last name? Either way, Adam goes first. Thank you, Katie. Thank you, SD34. Thank you, Adam and Brian. And most of all, to all of you that would take time out of your nights to join us. Anybody who has concerns that Minnesota has changed a lot over the years, I remind you that the Vikings lost an NFC championship game on Sunday, and it snowed 12 inches yesterday. My life began differently than many of you might know. I lost my birth father, Artie, to the Vietnam War when I was 6 months old in 1969. My mother was 24 and widowed, and we moved in with my great-grandparents for the first 3 years of my life, until my mother remarried, Eddie Phillips, who adopted me and into an extraordinary family of great blessings and achievement and principles and philanthropy. And as a young boy, I grew up seeing my adopted grandma in a beautiful home in California, and my Grandma Ruth in St. Paul in public housing. And I've lived that very fine line between advantage and disadvantage, which illuminates and inspires my run for Congress. I grew up as a little boy in Edina. I went to Edina Highlands School and grew up playing hockey. My parents taught me to value hard work and to take care of people. They taught me that success is not measured by how much we collect, rather by how much we share. And I worked hard as a little boy. I started a little mobile car wash service, worked in our family's print shop, and I bussed tables at Runyon's. And that illuminated what I did later in life. After I graduated from college, came back home, worked at our family business, started in the warehouse, our production plant, pursued my MBA on the weekends, and I worked my way up to ultimately run our business. I learned from my family that business is a means to an end. The end is taking care of employees and taking care of communities, which is what we do at Phillips, what we did at Talenti Gelato, and what I do now as co-owner of Penny's Coffee, where we pay everybody $15 an hour minimum wage. I'm running for Congress because I believe our Constitution anticipated a president like Donald Trump. I do not believe our Constitution anticipated a Congress filled with so many who lack courage. I believe our current representative, Eric Paulson, is the poster child for that. That's why I'm running for Congress. I would love to be your next representative.
Hi. Thank you. I'm Brian. I live in Eden Prairie with my wife and my daughter. In Washington, D.C., we have a Republican Party that doesn't believe in anything anymore, and we have a Democratic Party that looks like they can't remember what they said they believed in Friday night. And we've got all of us sort of caught in the crosshairs. A whole political system that's listening to 30 pundits in the Beltway and not to the millions of people who've taken the streets to be heard. And for me, I'm one of those people. I'm one of those people that took to the streets, and I think a lot of you people are those people that took to the streets, and I think that that's what Congress was made for. It's not the Senate. It's not the aristocracy. It's 435 members of the people, right? The creative directors, of the gardeners, of the teachers. And so that's why I'm running. And people say that you're new to politics, so like, how are you going to work with different people? And I say, well, I do that every day. If someone comes to my desk, I work with them. I don't have the privilege of going to cocktail fundraisers or caucusing in DC with only people who agree with me. My daughter's got to eat. If someone comes to my desk, I work with them. Just like all of you. Just like the normal people in this country do every day. And that's what I want to vote for, and that's what I want to fill Congress with. And I want to vote for one of you guys for Congress, but y'all aren't running. So I'm up here asking you to vote for me. Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're at the creative part of the program. This was the fun question I got to ask. So, and we'll start with Mr. Phillips, and we'll go to Mr. Santa Maria, and then Mr. Jennings for this one. But the question is, are you more of a Prince fan or a Replacements fan? And what's your favorite song?
Well, that's a tough one for me because I was a Dear Mats fan, and my mother owned a shop in downtown Minneapolis when I was a little boy called March 4th, if anybody remembers that, and outfitted Prince when he was just a teenager and handed out tickets to his first show at the State Theater because nobody would go to it. So I am passionate about both. You asked, what the second part of the question is, what's my favorite song?
Which one do you like better? And
So I would have to, but I'll tell you, the Mats were it for me as a boy. I loved the Replacements. And probably Let It Be is my favorite album. And Skyway, probably my favorite song.
Yeah. I'll thank your mother for the grind she put on to get Prince out there, because Prince is my go. And my favorite song actually is a Prince written song, but not a Prince performed song. Nothing Compares to You is my favorite Prince song. I don't have any stories about what I did to help him get where he is. He did but there, thank you.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to go with Prince on this one as well. I think of that line where I think Eric Clapton was being interviewed, and the interviewer asked him, what's it like being the best guitarist in the world? And his response was, I don't know, go ask Prince. Favorite song, that's a tough one because there are so many. Pretty much anything by The Police, but Every Breath You Take, probably.
Thank you. All right, back to serious questions. Partisanship is at an all-time high. What is your strategy to work with other members of Congress to create and pass bipartisan legislation? And we'll start with Mr. Santa Maria on that, and then go to Mr. Jennings, and finally, Mr. Phillips.
Thanks. So with all due respect to you and the question asker, whoever wrote that in, it's the DFL Forum. It's Democrats, farmers, laborers all together to decide who we think best represents our party. And we start off by asking, what can we do for Republicans? And I think that speaks to what the problem is with the Democrats right now. We need a message. We need to stand for something. And we don't need to ask the Republicans what they want from us. There are things that should be bipartisan. We should be able to go to Washington and make headway with sexual assault and victim protections. We should be able to do that. We should be able to raise funding for public schools. We should all agree on that. We should be able to raise the salaries of our soldiers. Things should be bipartisan. But this past weekend, we saw a political party refuse to vote on paying our soldiers. They refused to hold a vote on whether or not our soldiers should be paid. And at one point, you gotta say that Tina Turner couldn't have saved that marriage. That the divorce wasn't her fault. They refused to pay our soldiers. So I'd like to say I could get some sexual assault protection done with them, but I don't believe it. I think the Democratic Party needs to stand for something. We need to go there, and we need to remember that these are people who don't act in good faith. These are people who refuse to pay our soldiers. And why do they do it? Not because they don't like bombing people. They love bombing people. They did it because they wanted to blame me for it. Because they wanted to blame Democrats. They wanted to blame you for it. They could have held the vote. They didn't. Because they wanted to blame us for it. Sorry to start with that, but...
Thank you. And next, Mr. Jennings.
So thanks. Like I was saying, I sit on city council right now and represent thousands of people of all political stripes. Have lots of great conversations, reach out to lots of folks, and we can have good, rounded, bipartisan conversations here in the state. I have lots of friends, Republicans. We sit down. We might not agree on ideology, but we can figure things out. But I gotta kind of agree with Brian on this one. You can't. Being bipartisan suggests that everyone is at the table. And not everybody is at the table in Washington. The Republican Party is largely broken. I'd be in a position where I'd be happy to discuss healthcare or judicial nominations or a tax bill, but it's pretty evident that we're being completely locked out of that process. And the example that I go to that I think is so interesting is 2009 when we were passing the ACA. We had a majority in both legislative branches and the executive branch. We had the opportunity to pass something like Medicare for All. And what we did, in an effort to be bipartisan and extend an olive branch and do the right thing, was we took the single payer off the table before negotiations even began. We have got to be smarter than that. What we did was we went to the Heritage Foundation plan, which was a Republican plan, and we then let the Republicans make 144 amendments to it to really make it complicated and have what we have today. And then when it went up for a vote, zero Republicans voted for it. Democrats are the only ones talking about bipartisanship in Washington, and the Republican leadership knows it, and they have baked it into their strategy. And we are losing ground step by step. So in short, We write better policy as Democrats. We should have pushed single payer through back in 2009, and the best way to fight bad politics is to write good policy and stand behind it.
Well, talking is easy and getting things done is hard, and I'm up to the challenge. I've spent my career in business and succeeding not because of unilateral decision making, but because we've always had a culture of listening and seeking ideas, not just from those who served in management offices, but people who work on factory floors. And it's the divergence of opinion and the divergence of ideas and the solicitation of innovation that indeed gets things done. But I'm going to make an argument to you, and that is that I travel the district every day in my government repair truck, many of you have seen. My mother doesn't let me drive when it's below zero, but other days I do. And I do so because I want to listen to people. And I do. I travel throughout the district, and I invite people. I don't care if you're a Republican, a Democrat, a Libertarian, or anything in between. I want to hear what's on people's mind. And I'll tell you, I've discovered something. Partisanship in Congress is at an all-time high, and it's despicable. It's one reason I'm running for Congress. But as I talk to people in our district, you'd be amazed and surprised at how unanimous it is relative to outcomes. Everybody wants better public schools. Everybody wants to feel safer. Everybody wants their tax dollars used well. Nobody wants more abortion. Nobody wants more gun violence. We all want better quality health care at a lower cost. So I will propose this, everybody, no matter what your number one issue of importance is to you, please make campaign finance reform number 2, because the partisanship in Congress is not because of us. It's because we have parties that are beholden to significant vested interest in donors to whom they owe obligation and responsibility. I intend to elevate that and be the most vocal, significant advocate for campaign finance reform that Congress has. That's why I'm only one of 6 candidates or electeds in Congress that don't take PAC money, don't take federal lobbyist money, and don't take special interest money. That is how I will help rectify the partisanship. There's much less that divides us than many would have us believe, and that's my promise to you.
Thank you. For our next question, the order will be alphabetical. It'll be Mr. Jennings, Mr. Phillips, and Mr. Santa Maria. And the question is, Congress just passed a massive overhaul of our tax system. What do you like about the new law, and what would you change?
You know, it was interesting when I first saw this question. I didn't write anything down because there wasn't anything that I really like about the bill. It is frankly a $1.5 trillion campaign ad for the Republicans who are beholden to their donors. So I really don't want to talk about the bill. I'd actually like to talk about what I'd like to see. Because if anything, we do need tax reform in this country, but we need tax reform that actually works for the middle class. Now what we just passed was based on the fundamental philosophy of trickle-out-down economics. And trickle-down economics is dead. It died. It doesn't work. So what we need to do is have a progressive tax system in this country that actually helps working class folks. There's not a whole lot for me to say on this. I'm not going to go my full 2 minutes. It's just we all do better when we all do better. And that's it. Thanks.
So I own a small business, two coffee shops, and I believe that tax policy should generally and disproportionately benefit middle-income Americans. Because a small business like ours, in which I'm invested, benefits when more people have more to spend. And if they do, they come and buy a couple more cups of coffee. We do. Maybe take the kids to Valley Fair a couple more times a summer and buy some more clothes at Target. That's how demand is created, that's how all the boats rise, and that's how I think federal tax policy should provide incentives. I don't think this bill did that, despite my best hopes. That said, there are some things I like. I think reducing the corporate tax rate was actually a smart move in this country. It will keep jobs here. It's going to repatriate hundreds of billions of dollars back in this country. That's going to be a stimulus. And that is true, and I support that. You know, I believe that increasing the child tax credit is also a good thing, and doubling the standard deduction. These are actually benefits. What do I not like? Some of this is quite obvious for everybody in this room. The elimination of the self-deduction is going to affect every single person probably in this room, which is why that 12 of Eric Paulson's peers, Republican peers in Congress, from states like ours, high-tax states, New Jersey, New York, California, voted against this bill because it's going to hurt us. We're going to send more money to Washington that we won't get back, and that's wrong. It's going to reduce charitable giving in the state, which is what Minnesota is known for. These are detriments that a thoughtful representative who was not beholden to the interests that finances campaigns would have voted against because it will hurt the people in the 3rd District. But truth is truth. There are some elements that are good, there are far more that are bad, particularly for Minnesotans. And Minnesotans are my foremost responsibility to represent. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I echo sentiments from both of them. The first thing I thought when it said, what do you like about it? I was like, oh, well, doubling the deduction, doubling the standard deduction, that should have been done a long time ago. The standard deduction hadn't kept up with inflation. But I also like the way it was pitched. I like this idea of making taxes simpler. They told you that they were going to make taxes simpler, and they said that by eliminating tax brackets, which obviously doesn't make taxes any simpler. It just means that people on the top get to keep more of their money. But I think they ended up making it more complicated, and the way you make it simpler is you get rid of all the loopholes. Raise the standard deduction, add more tax brackets, but your golf course shouldn't be considered protected land, right? Your jet shouldn't be a business deduction. I get that they're the 1%, but that shouldn't make them a protected minority. They should be held to be paying taxes on the same money, the same usage that everybody else does in the middle class. Now on my side, I have a very progressive tax system laid out, smarter taxes. And what we do there is we add more tax brackets, we double the tax brackets, which brings us only to half as many as Eisenhower had when he left office. So we boost the tax brackets, we make them stronger, and we need them to go higher. So that right now they don't stop at $400,000 a year. They keep going up. Every time that salary doubles, you add 5%. So that by the time you're at 25 million, you're still gonna pay more when you hit 50 million. We have to incentivize corporations to be paying people to the middle and not at the top. Because when you do that, you get what Dean's talking about, which is more money in people's pockets so they can go into Pennies and buy coffee.
Thank you. So we're gonna bring things a little more local with this next question, and the order will be Mr. Phillips, Mr. Santa Maria, and then Mr. Jennings will go last. Suburban cities like Maple Grove and Rogers are struggling to find low-wage workers to fill entry-level positions in retail, food service, and warehousing. How can we remove barriers to filling these essential jobs in our local economy?
Well, it's an ironic issue, and I'll start with a principle that I believe that everybody who wishes to work and works hard should be afforded the opportunity to do so and be provided a livable wage. I remember a day where young people, even like myself, worked more part-time jobs. And we have to look at this as a multi-pronged approach. We have to take over, or at least look into comprehensive immigration reform to ensure that those who come here to this country to work hard and achieve better lives and outcomes are afforded the opportunity to do so. And I'm nauseated and disturbed that our country and both parties have failed to do so yet. We need to provide transportation infrastructure so that people who live in communities far and wide can get to work. And most people don't have the luxury of an automobile when they're starting their careers. And our community should have invested more over the years in transportation, and we as a country need to do better in that respect. There is no answer. We do ironically have a labor issue in this country. And we have to afford more opportunities to young people to take career paths that may not have been the ones that would have been taken perhaps 25 years ago. We have to provide the skills and the training to take these career paths and apprenticeships, not necessarily everybody going to four-year colleges. These are possibilities. It is not solvable with a magic wand, but we can certainly do better, and that's one of my responsibilities.
A good start would be boosting the minimum wage. It's not just the right thing to do, but Minneapolis has already done it, so we're going to keep losing labor if we don't keep up in the suburbs. People are just going to drive to work there where they get paid more. Adding tax brackets, which I just talked about, forcing companies to move money down to middle salaries instead of keeping them at the top, incentivize them to take that money away from huge salaries and spread it out. And we need to make room for lower income families here in the suburbs, and that means affordable housing, that means public transportation, transportation infrastructure, like Dean was talking about. We need to make this a welcoming place. Our schools need to be ready for diversity. Our schools need to be ready for lower income families. We need to spread the tide. On the minimum wage thing, I'll talk about this a little later if we get to the question too, but we forget tipped employees. We forget service employees. You mentioned restaurants, food service in the question. These people get paid a minimum wage of $2.13 an hour. Right now, employees are outsourcing paying them, or employers are outsourcing paying them onto the customers. And we need to change that. We need to get service employees back where everybody else is, and then let the tips be what they were supposed to be, which was a little bit of extra in the pocket for great service. And hopefully we get to that question, because I'd like to talk about that.
Yeah, so I talked about it in my introduction, where we need to pass a federally mandated $15 an hour minimum wage. We actually need to put companies in a position where they have to do that. We have to do more than just pay our employees $15 an hour and then hope that other businesses lead by our example. Now, I want to throw a caveat on that. I understand that small businesses, they live and die by their cash flow. So any business out there that has 50 or fewer employees, they should receive a tax credit so they can still maintain their bottom line, but their employees are making more. The real target on this are the Walmarts, who strategically actually post themselves outside metros in places like Rogers, because they know that they don't pay a living wage. When you go in there and you fill out a job application, they will actually walk you through the paperwork for assistance. And that essentially is just a backdoor subsidy to a very large company that's already making a lot of money, and we need to hold them to account. But that's just one piece of the puzzle, because yeah, it comes down to infrastructure. We are in sore need of infrastructure in this country, and we need to provide the dollars that are there in order to get more of it, because we need mass transit so folks can travel. Because if you're only making $15,000 a year, you cannot afford to own a car. At $15 an hour, you're making a little more than $30, but that's still not a whole lot of money if you've got a full family. But the other things that I think we need to concentrate on are affordable childcare, so that those individuals who are willing to work and they want to go out there know that their children are being cared for when they're not there. And it's basically doing everything that we can to get behind the working class and expand the middle class, because that's what this is all about. We need the demand side. A bigger middle class is better for this nation. Thank you.
I chair the Transportation Committee for the Metropolitan Council, so this next question I'm really excited about and eager to hear the answers. The transportation industry is in the beginning stages of a radical change towards electric and autonomous vehicles. Describe the role Congress can play in guiding positive outcomes for our transportation system, and including providing a sustainable funding model. And for this question, we will start with Mr. Santa Maria and go to Mr. Phillips Mr. Santa Maria, then Mr. Jennings, and then Mr. Phillips. My apologies.
Yeah, this is great. I've said for a long time that we're not going to solve our traffic problem with smarter roads, we're going to solve it with smarter cars. And they're coming whether we want them to or not. We have a tendency to cling to old technologies because, for obvious reasons, right? People rely on them for their salaries and to support their families. So one of the things we can do is better prepare for the technology of the future, and that means training people better for what these are going to be, being aware of what they're going to be, looking to coal miners and industries that are falling by the wayside, and making sure that we have ways of transitioning them not just into the new fields, but to the new locations where we need the employees for those new fields. And we can do that in Congress. We can also make sure information technology is funded nationally, because we're going to need processing centers. There's going to be a lot of strain on our data when all these cars start tapping into the same information system that everybody else is. We can start teaching our children coding at a young age. I know that a lot of public schools are already doing that, but if your child isn't learning coding, then you need to learn coding and you need to teach them. And we can study the safety of these cars and understand them better, so we're not constantly fighting this push-pull of whether or not Tesla can sell here or not sell there, or whether a car needs a driver here or doesn't there. I mean, it's going to get to the point, obviously, where it's not going to be a question of whether a car can be on the road without a driver, but whether a car can be on the road with a driver, because these computers are proving that they're much safer than we are. And the more we're ready for that in Congress, and the more we're looking at those safety standards and collecting that data, which is not something we're always good at, especially with this administration, then the better prepared we'll be.
Well, I'm going to make the argument that good government and good governance doesn't anticipate what we're going to need tomorrow. It's what we're going to need a decade or two from now. And 20th century funding models and systems and structures are not satisfactory in a 21st century world. And we're not decades away from self-driving cars and electric cars. They're here. And we're maybe months away. And yet we are still using a gasoline tax to pay for most of our infrastructure. So thoughtful government should be addressing what we should have been anticipating a long, long time ago. So I'm going to make that argument. We got to be progressive. We have to look around the world for best practices. And I'm going to make a significant and impassioned plea that all of you in this room, and Congress, and state and local government, start getting behind the notion of high-speed rail. It is what can connect this country. It is what we should be doing. The rest of the world already is. And most importantly, it reduces the carbon footprint we leave behind vis-a-vis flying on airplanes by 2/3. So if we want to think and be mindful of how we will get around this country in the 21st century, not in a matter of decades, but in a matter of months and years, let's be thoughtful about it. That's the responsibility of government. And that means you got to take risks, and that means you got to do some things sometimes that are not terribly popular. But frankly, the question about Rogers and Maple Grove and the environs that are struggling to find people to work, the real core of this, my friends, is transportation. People can't afford to live in beautiful suburbs for some of these jobs. And we have thousands of people in our cities who cannot get here. So that is the role of government. And that's what has to change. And that means making sometimes decisions that have a much, much longer horizon than unfortunately we're accustomed to right now.
So certainly in Congress, you have the power of the purse, and it's about budgeting. And we can't make the same mistake that we made with renewable energy back in the 80s. The Europeans are great to look at in this particular model because they had a long-term view on what wind and solar were going to look like. So they put together a tax incentive structure that went out 30 years. And companies were very confident, and they knew exactly what they were getting, and it put them in a position where they could make the capital investment that they needed in order to be successful. And we as Americans fell behind. It's one of the reasons a lot of the renewable energy technology that's out there is foreign. So when we're in Congress, we need to think about transportation in the same way. And we need to have a long-term view. And the other thing too is there's all this political infighting around who's going to get credit for infrastructure spending right now. This has been around for a long time, and the Democrats want credit, and the Republicans want credit, and nothing happens. And when I go to Congress, I don't care who gets credit. The American people are being held hostage by the fact that we're not releasing money for, we don't even necessarily need to talk about the future. We've got, 6,000 deficient bridges in the state of Minnesota that need to be fixed. There's a lot of crumbling infrastructure out there that just needs to be maintained. And lastly, whatever we do, if we transfer to new technologies or we create new jobs, all of the jobs that we're creating need to be prevailing wage. Because we need to ensure that the people that are providing this work are being provided or put in a position where they can make enough money to live their lives, save for college, save for their retirement. Thank you.
Thank you So for our fifth question, we'll go back to alphabetical order. And it is, the federal government is mandated to fund 40% of special education costs. However, actual funding provided to the states is approximately 17%. How will you advocate to increase funding until it reaches 40%? So, Mr. Jennings.
Thank you. Yeah, this one's very important to me. I have met with a lot of school board members in the district since I started running. I sat down, talked to several superintendents, and they all agree that fully funding the special education mandate is the single most important thing that we can do at the congressional level. It opens up dollars that they currently have to take out of their general budgets and cross-subsidize over to the special education mandate, which in some cases, well, in most cases, is around 10 to 15% of their overall budget. Now, to put that in real dollar terms, for the city of Minnetonka, that's $5.5 million. That's money that they can be using to help fund 0 to 5, early childhood education, summer programs so that you don't get the summer slide, mental health services, other things that schools need, because schools are essentially, at the end of the day, these small social services buildings that have to deal with whatever comes to their doorstep. And we need to do everything that we can to fund it. So how do we do that? Well, in this tax bill that was just passed that I'm not real fond of, part of that, there was an $80 billion allotment sent in addition to what we've already allocated to military spending on top of that. Military spending before that tax bill was even passed already represented the single largest portion of discretionary spending in our budget, and we spend too much. You take that $80 billion, you're funded. And we just have to have the political courage to come out and say that, because it seems to be like this third rail of politics, like heaven forbid you should cut back on military spending. And I say that as someone who was in the military. So we gotta get behind it, we gotta have the courage and stand up and get it done. Thank you.
Well, I believe that every child in this country deserves a high-quality public education, and I believe that every school in this country deserves the resources to provide that education. And that means we start with fully funding IDEA. Congressman Walz has co-sponsored a bill that would do so over 10 years. Should I be so fortunate to serve all of you in Congress, I would get behind it right away. And it begins with that. This is a matrix of our various school districts in the area, and it adds up to $147 million in unfunded federal mandates, the responsibility of our federal government to provide the resources that they are not. Those $147 million, each one of them, have to come from local budgets. If those were instead made available to hire more teachers and provide more support to kids, our schools would be higher performing. That is the truth, and we have to start with that. I spend a lot of time with teachers and administrators and superintendents and principals. Convened a group just the other day around a table at a Caribou, and I hear the same things over and over and over. I will be a loud advocate for that. And I want to remind you that this recent tax bill did away with a lot of the estate taxes that would be collected over the next number of years. By many arguments, over $200 billion. So if you measure a country's principles by where it directs its resources, we just made a terrible error in moral judgment. Imagine what those dollars could do for the kids that are now suffering because of these unfunded mandates. That's a personal responsibility of mine, as I know it is to my associates on this stage. Thank you.
Yeah, Dean touched on IDEA. The 40% number you're referring to comes from the idea of 40% mandate when it was, I think, the handicapped students, I have it written down here, Handicapped Children's Act before that. And it's not a new thing that it's not funded. It's never been funded. They've never hit that 40% number. They've never come close to hitting that 40% number. The burden is always falling on the local municipalities to pick up the check. What has changed currently, especially under this administration now, is we have a group of people who are making a concerted effort to move money that would have otherwise gone to public education into for-profit hands, into other ways to do this where someone can make money off of it. And that comes from this, it's not something, it makes us look bad when we say, but it comes from this, this infatuation with capitalism, this idea that we were founded to be a capitalist nation above all else. And freedom means the room for capitalism, but it doesn't mean the priority of capitalism. What the Constitution says is promote the general welfare. Promote the general welfare, not promote a single person or a single company's welfare. It's promote the general welfare, and we have a Republican Party now that doesn't believe in democracy. They believe in this religion, this cult of capitalism. They don't read Thomas Jefferson, they read Ayn Rand. They don't believe in people, they believe in money. And so what we have to be able to do is stand up and make that argument that promote the general welfare was written in there for a reason. And when we have resources, we need to advocate them, or we need to put them into places where they help everybody and not just a single person's right to have a business. And what I can do in Congress, what we can all do in Congress, is stand up front and center and fight for that money, fight that money goes to the right places, not overpaying the military, not losing it elsewhere. We can support state officials if they take action for recourse on retrieving that money that they were promised. And we can stop voting for educational budgets that move that money away from public education.
Thank you. So we're at the halfway mark for the questions. Question number 6 is, we're going to move on to energy.
I was hoping someone would come out and throw a football into a big Dr.
We have no halftime show, I'm sorry. So our next 2 questions are about energy and the environment. Question number 6 is, the U.S. is highly dependent on non-renewable energy sources. How can we incentivize individuals, small businesses, and large corporations to transition to renewable sources of energy? And for this question, we will start with Mr. Phillips, and then go to Mr. Santa Maria, and then finally Mr. Jennings.
Well, I think we'll all agree that we need to transition away from we need to be a fossil fuel-free economy. Say that 5 times fast. Fossil fuel-free economy. For not just for the obvious reasons, but also it's a national security issue. And we can do better. You know, I tell many that we did not leave the Stone Age because we ran out of rocks. We left the Stone Age because we came up with better ways to do things. And we have the better ways to do things now. It's the responsibility of good government to provide thoughtful incentives to encourage the behavior that we believe is in the collective best interests of our country. And this is not rocket science. We have the technology, and frankly, it is the most beautiful intersection of thoughtful policy and job creation, and most importantly, saving the earth. Thoughtful incentives, tax credits can achieve this, and renewable energies are available to us. I just visited the electricians training facility this afternoon in St. Michael and looked at their solar energy training program. Solar, we can generate as much solar energy here, almost as much as in Florida, despite living in the tundra. And frankly, this is not just because it's good for the earth, it's actually becoming economically more feasible. So if you put all these things together and you wonder why it's not getting done, I'm going to bring you back to what I'm going to make the argument time and time again: campaign finance reform. We have vested, moneyed interests in this country, very moneyed petroleum industry interests, that finance campaigns to the tune of tens of millions of dollars a year, by hundreds of millions of dollars of lobbyist hours to lobby 535 members of Congress. And we wonder why we can't affect policy change to move to policies that help us and our children and grandchildren. My friends, if we can address that, we can at least take steps towards the thoughtful policies that we need. And that's why I ask you to make this your number 2 issue.
That facility in St. Michael is beautiful. I was there myself last week for about 3 hours, and what they're doing is amazing. I've had some experience with this. When I was at Allianz, I started the renewable energy program here in North America. I was able to leverage the balance sheets of 4 subsidiaries from the company, and we had about $100 million to work with in total, but the corporate board only gave me about $200 million to work with. The very first investment that we made was in a 550 megawatt solar farm. That is enough power to power every single building in the 3rd Congressional District. We have the ability to get behind projects like this, both solar and wind. This is one of the biggest wind states as well. But these are just tactical, and we have to think strategically. Robert Rubin, who was the Treasury Secretary for Clinton, He had this plan that he talked about where you put carbon on a balance sheet, you change the accounting rules, you make companies record how much carbon they're burning, and it's a liability, and it affects the overall value of their stock. And the great thing about this, it would have seismic effects, because you basically have recruited all of the Wall Street analysts that are out there that value companies, and you put them in a position to incentivize CEOs who are going to be watching that bottom line, because they're going to try and maximize their share value so they can get their bonus. You do that, it would affect every single company in the entire United States. And that's just high level. But it goes back to, I mean, there's a convergence, whatever we do, and I did talk to the IBEW about this, is that whatever new jobs are created, we need to ensure that they still maintain prevailing wage, because right now that is not happening. We're making this transfer from old energy to new energy, and what we're doing is the little guy is getting squished, and that's got to end. Thanks.
Yeah, I think we all agree on this, hopefully in the room. We just got to get the other half of Congress behind it. I like to say that we need to treat staying on this planet in the future as seriously as we treated leaving it in the past. We had a moon mission. We looked up there and we said we're going to go there, and then we did. We didn't know how, we just did it. And this is where the general welfare thing comes in, right? Is that the government exists to promote the general welfare. The government exists to look at what we need and then find ways to solve for it by getting the smartest people in a room, giving them a bunch of money and saying, figure this out. That's what a moon mission for Earth would be. It would be treating this problem of staying on the planet with the same resources that we treated our space mission, combining the resources of NASA and the Army Corps of Engineers and giving them time and money to make it happen. We started the Industrial Revolution here, and we have a responsibility to start the environmental one. And it will be as financially bountiful to us. The way we encourage that is sort of two parts. We've got the small guys and we've got the big guys. The small guys, meaning all of us, people who own houses, people who own small businesses, we can give home battery rebates. Having a home battery means that we start putting our energy burden in the middle of the night instead of the middle of the day, when we can power up those batteries, which is a way of using our wind energy, which is something we're not utilizing at night because it's an immediate resource. We can start looking at the big guys, and we can obviously put forward a carbon tax, and we can start holding people accountable in a way that is equal to the offenses, right? If all you're doing is getting a fine for breaking rules or dirtying up our atmosphere to make a ton of money, well, that's not really a disincentive, because you just made a ton of money to get there. You've got plenty of it now to pay that fine. We've got to start putting jail time, forced corporate sales on the market. Volkswagen lied to us for years to make billions of dollars selling cars, and they're still selling cars. There's no punishment, there's no recourse.
Thank you. For our next question, I will hand the mic back to Mr. Santamaria, and then we'll have Mr. Jennings, and then finally Mr. Phillips. Living in the land of 10,000 lakes, it is easy to take plentiful water for granted, but clean water supplies are being stressed by a growing population, business and industry, and a changing environment. What would you do to ensure that clean water remains a Minnesota competitive advantage in the future?
Yeah, we've got to protect ourselves from the mining industry. We've got to protect ourselves from people who want to strip our land. And we need the EPA to be funded, and we need the EPA to be staffed, and we need them to be taking information and collecting statistics on what is good, what is good, and what is bad. Because our goal as Democrats is not just to squash industry. We're not looking to put miners out of business. We're looking to make sure they're doing it in a safe way, that they're not just releasing chemicals into our drinking water, that we are protecting our national parks, and that we are able to coexist, that we can have a strong, robust economy that is making money in a safe and healthy way, and also making money off keeping it safe and healthy, and giving the people the country that we are here to protect.
Well, it starts from the top down. First thing you do, if you're president, you don't put someone in charge of the EPA that is completely against the EPA. I know I'm not president and I don't have that control, but certainly would like to make sure that he doesn't get any money because we do have Powers' purse. But it comes down to coordination from the top down. I sit on city council, LMCD, it's the Lake Minnetonka Conservation District. We work pretty closely with that. So we have all kinds of invasive species that we have to deal with. And I'm amazed at how uncoordinated our efforts are. Because we do it from a city level, and we do have this board, but there's so much opportunity for us to do it better. And if we turn to the EPA, even at the state level, doesn't have any money. So we need to make sure that we're funding these programs and we're making them a priority. I mean, I talk about how healthcare is my #1 issue, but in actuality, if we don't get the environment worked out, we're just moving furniture around on the Titanic. And water quality, these are resources that are depleting. We are losing our watershed underneath the entire Midwest due to how we are managing it. We discovered it in the 50s, and we have been benefiting from that, from crop outcomes for decades. And it's going to disappear in just a few decades. So we've got to do everything that we can to get behind the government, make sure that we're safeguarding it. Thank you.
Once again, this is an issue on which just about everybody in our district agrees. Republicans, Democrats, Libertarians, Independents agree that we need to preserve and protect our rivers and lakes and have clean water. And how do we do so? In Minnesota particularly, we need to ensure sustainable farming practices. A lot of the runoffs, fertilizers and chemicals from farms go into our streams and wetlands and cause destruction. And there are thoughtful ways to do so, to provide incentives and encourage it. We have to close the loopholes in the Clean Water Act. Barack Obama tried, he failed in doing so, but we have 2 million miles of streams and 20 million acres of wetlands in this country that are not protected under the Clean Water Act, that are actually bringing a lot of these pollutants to our waters and lakes and streams. And these are, you asked about action, these are ways to act. If I should go to Congress, these are the loopholes that must be closed, and frankly, should be able to do so, because everybody agrees. The inaction disappoints me, dismays me, and deeply, deeply troubles me. But this is something we can accomplish, and certainly will.
Thank you. For question 8, we're back to alphabetical order. I'm going to have to change this up. I'm doing that a little too often. The question is, what do you think is more important to solve, access to health care or the rising cost of health insurance? So, Mr. Jennings.
Well, you can't have access to universal health care if you don't do something about the expenses. The great thing about Medicare for All is that it actually kind of takes care of both. Right now, medical expenses represent about 18% of the overall GDP expense in this country. If we were to move to a single-payer system, that would drop to 9%. That's essentially about $5,000 for every single citizen in the United States. And think about the economic jolt on that. Now, what I don't think is, that's an enormous amount of money. And think to yourselves, what value are they providing? They're not providing anything. They're just a middleman that sits in the center and they vacuum up cash. And then the executives, they retire and they go out and they buy soccer teams and they charge you even more money to come watch the games. So, yeah, we can actually do both. It's just a matter of having the political courage to get behind it. A single payer makes sense. A single payer system makes sense. And we can get it done. Thank you.
Well, the question is, which is more important, access or cost? And if you don't have insurance coverage right now for healthcare, access is most important. If you do have it, it's cost. And as Adam said, 18% of our economy is consumed by healthcare in this country. It is about double the rest of the developed world. And despite that, our outcomes are generally mid-pack, which means we don't have very good value in this country. So I have a 3-pronged prescription to how to move forward, because I talk to too many people in this district every day who do have coverage, who are just one illness away from bankruptcy. And those are people with coverage. And I talk to people who have good jobs, who can barely afford their coverage. So we have a comprehensive problem, there's no question. So my proposal is as follows. I believe in the immediate expansion of Medicare as an option for anybody that wants to buy into it. I'm an example of one of those people who buys insurance on the individual market, and I would welcome the opportunity to investigate Medicare for my daughters and me as an option. And in so doing, choose, because this is a nation that does celebrate freedom and choice and options. And if we want to get something done fast and we want to migrate to a way and achieve healthcare for all, that's my proposition. Let's do so. There are thoughtful bills that are in Congress that unfortunately won't be brought to the floor based on current leadership, but that is one way to do so. Secondly, what nobody talks about is that our entire system provides an incentive to reward procedures, not prevention. We do not have a healthcare system. We have a sick care system. And until we begin the migration to prevention, we will not reduce the cost of our healthcare in this country. And thirdly, immediately, we should put an end to subsidizing the entire world's prescription drug pricing. We pay for it. Everybody in this room pays for the rest of the world's lower costs of pharmaceuticals. Medicare should negotiate, just like the VA, thoughtfully, and in so doing, reduce the cost of prescription drugs. These are actionable, achievable outcomes that I would love to affect the day I step foot in Washington.
So which is more important, access to healthcare or the rising cost of healthcare? And I would argue that they're the same issue, that the reason people don't have access to healthcare is because of the rising cost of healthcare, right? Like, it's not like we don't have enough hospitals. It's not like people are getting lost on the way to the doctor. They don't have access because they can't pay for access. If we could build a bigger airport and get people access, then we would. We can't, because we have allowed profit to take over our healthcare system. There's some simple answers we can do, maybe not so simple, but some obvious answers we can do that Dean touched on. We can open up Medicare for negotiation. We can expand it, do a Medicare buy-in. I'd argue that you should be voting for Democrats who support a Medicare for all system. I think that a system without a single payer, a system that's still allowing for profit to dictate where our energy and resources go in healthcare is a system that's destined to be exploited. Congress just gave a whole bunch of corporations billions of dollars. They gave Pfizer billions of dollars, and Pfizer responded by saying that we're no longer going to look into Alzheimer's treatments or Parkinson's treatments because the profit's not there for us, because we weren't seeing a return on our investment. That's a big problem. If we're letting capitalism decide what is worth treating and what isn't, then there are things that are never ever going to be treated. We need to start taking on the responsibility as people, as a government of the people, by the people, for the people, interested in the general welfare, of putting money into medical research where our for-profit system can't. And we need to guarantee people health care as part of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Okay, we're in the home stretch. Our next question, we'll have Mr. Phillips answer first, and then Mr. Santa Maria, and then Mr. Jennings. Research shows that the burden of child care and elder care falls primarily on women, in many cases causing wage stagnation and lack of advancement in the workplace. What can Congress do to support women's economic security? And again, Mr. Phillips.
The contention is true, and I'm among the fortunate ones, blessed with a large family that's been in a position to care for a grandmother that suffered from Alzheimer's for the better part of a decade, a father who suffered from cancer for the better part of a decade. And I know the burdens that we faced as a blessed family, with a number of us supporting these illnesses. I can only imagine for those who walk in shoes when they're alone and caring for a family facing difficult circumstances. Demographically speaking, the numbers are very challenging. The Great Generation, much of it represented in this room, demographically large. The next generation, demographically smaller. And we are going to face substantial challenges, especially as the question poses for the burden that falls on women for caregiving. We need to establish paid leave policy, a national paid leave policy, and join the rest of the developed world. It's embarrassing as the United States of America that we have not made the moral choice to do so. We need affordable childcare. How can people not go to work when they don't make enough to even pay for childcare during the day? Let's invest in pre-K education, because in so doing, we will save ourselves money down the road. We will prepare kids for school, and most of all, for single-parent households that need to work and provide for their family. The kids can be looked after and educated while you go to work. And tax credits for caregivers. One of the most challenging no-pay jobs in this country is caring for a loved one who is sick. And we should be a thoughtful, compassionate society and affect thoughtful policy to take care of people. That's what being a Democrat is all about. That's what being an American is all about. And that's what I tend to affect.
Family leave. And I don't know, I'm guessing, Dean, wants family leave for both men and women. We talk about family leave for moms all the time, but family leave for men too, and it's not just because I'm selfish and I want to spend some time at home with my kid. It's partly because of that, but it's because if we are putting that burden on the mother all the time, and if we are giving her the family leave so she can stay home and heal and be with the kid and have that bonding, then what we're doing is we're telling employers that a woman is more of a risk to you than a man is in an office setting. That a woman could just leave for 3 months and a man won't. So when it comes time for promotions, the man is the one that's going to get the promotion because he's not as risky of a promotion as a mom is. If you tell parents, you both got to go home, you both got to be with that kid, it is good business to be a good parent, then we get rid of that advantage men have in the workplace, and women start to catch up a little, and their salaries start to get there, and their promotions start to get there, and we start fixing the wage gap as well as fixing the child care problem. The other thing I mentioned earlier that I wanted to talk about is living wage applies here when we talk about tipped employees. It's not, living wage obviously gets people's incomes up, which helps them to be able to take care of a family. But if we start applying a living wage to tipped employees, 1 in 11 waged employees in this country are tipped employees, which means 1 in 11 are allowed to be paid less than minimum wage. The vast majority of them are women. So what we're doing is we're saying that a huge contingent of women, it's okay if we pass the burden of paying them onto you and not the employer. It's okay if they get treated as a servant class. We need to get those wages up higher. They do a hard job. I've talked a little longer than I wanted to. The only service employee woman in this country that's making 6 figures is Stormy Daniels. And that's not okay. That's not okay.
So, thanks, Brian, for actually bringing that up. Because no, not the last part. Not the last part. Wow, that was embarrassing. No, I was a stay-at-home dad for 2 years. And greatest 2 years of my life. I'm so glad that I did it. But it does put a burden on you. And if anybody out there who thinks being a stay-at-home parent is easy, well, I got news for you. If you think that's the case, go try it, because it's not. And if there's anybody in this room that is a single working parent, hats off. Because there is a special place in heaven for you, and I don't know how you do it, and I sincerely mean that. I had somebody that I could pass the kids off to at the end of the day to reclaim my sanity. So, but no, I mean, it's one of the, it's some of those things that these are simple. I mean, if we passed a higher wage in this country, if we had a federally mandated minimum wage that we could increase so that people who wanted to re-enter the workforce could, and you'd make more money, prevailing wages, jobs. But we should support and lobby for the ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment. I mean, that's gonna help significantly just all across the board, and it has been far too long. That's been out there for decades. Invest more in the Family Leave Act, and then we support programs for affordable childhood and early childhood education. you've got people out there that they're willing to work. They want to go back to work. They're ready. It's dignified. You want to be part of the workplace, but you can't afford to do it because your child care actually costs more than the very money that you would make at the job that you would have. So it just doesn't, it makes no sense to do that. So in Congress, we do everything we can to support those programs and ensure that they are fully funded. Thank you.
Thank you. It is our final question, and we're going to have Mr. Santa Maria go first, and then Mr. Jennings, and followed by Mr. Phillips. And the question is, when elected, how will you listen to and work for all constituencies in the 3rd District?
So the question is, how will you work for and listen to the constituents? And I will do it adamantly, I will do it passionately, I will do it inclusively. We don't need someone in Congress who's only going to work for the people who agree with them. We've got someone who does that now, and we don't like it. We want someone different. So I invite arguing, I invite being wrong, I love being wrong. It doesn't mean I'm not going to be stubborn and make my case, but I want someone to prove to me a better way. I want to hear a better idea than mine. So I say a lot that we need equality, however, whatever you look like, whatever you pray like, whatever you love like. I'll add to that, whatever you vote like. That we need to all start treating the people we disagree with as intelligently as we treat the people we agree with. Also, I'd like to say that it's important that we listen to and respond to the people who are different than us, not just politically, but culturally and racially. Black people need to know that they're valuable, that their lives matter, as does our trans community, as do the homeless in our neighborhoods, in our area. And we have a panel of candidates here, the candidates, that are blindingly white men, myself included. So it's incumbent on us, it's our responsibility to get out there and to listen and to be reading and to be educating ourselves on the experiences that we haven't had and that we don't understand. And to not just hear those stories, but to try very hard to understand them and apply them.
Yeah, it's incumbent upon representatives to listen. We're certainly not getting that now. I'm going to rifle through these pretty quickly because I want to make another point too. But you shouldn't have to pay $2,700 or $5,400 like Eric Paulson does to be in his Eagle Bird Circle or whatever it is, so that he can sit down and talk to you about what's important. It's just part of the job description. You go out, you meet with people, you're the representative, you don't always agree, and you take it on the nose every once in a while. And the first town hall I want to have a marathon session because it's been almost a decade. By 2019, people are going to be hungry for this, and there are going to be a lot of angry Republicans who want to have say too. So we're gonna settle into some big library. Everybody's going to get a chance to talk. We're going to have water and pizza, and we're going to stay there until everybody has had a chance to have their say. It's important. A lot of it's just about letting the air out of the balloon. But provide regular updates like Representative McCollum. But most importantly, I want to have a central location for my office, so that if there are more disadvantaged communities that don't have access to public transportation, I don't know exactly where this would be, but I don't want to put my office next to my house so that it's just a short commute. This is about service. It's about access. It's about giving people that access. How much time do I have? 45? I just want to circle back to Medicare for All real quickly. One thing that everyone in this room should be aware of, I've got 30 seconds. The public option, over time, is actually very, very risky. Private insurance companies are extremely good at keeping healthy people and shifting sick people out. And when they do that, Medicare, their risk pool goes up, the cost starts to go up, and it falls right into Republican strategies. It becomes a government program that's too expensive, and then in long term in the future, they're ready to axe it. So that's actually not a good place for us to go. Thank you.
Well, I do not aspire to be a politician. I want to be a representative. And representation begins with listening. And despite, I think, Adam and Brian would agree, this is one of the most consuming journeys of one's life, running for Congress. But I will tell you, the most joyful element of this journey is visiting with people. And this is my mobile office, my little government repair truck. It doesn't say I'm a Democrat. It just is an invitation to come visit. And I serve coffee out of the service window, and I ask people to come talk. And that's how I do things. That's how I've done things my entire life, is to invite conversation, because I believe when you run for Congress, you don't run to represent your party, you run to represent your district. And I do not wish to be the Democratic version of Eric Paulson. I want to change how things are done. This transcends the three of us up on this stage. It transcends this district. It transcends this race, this state, and this country. It's about humanity and decency and caring and listening and inviting people to conversation, because if we conduct our lives digitally and in corners, we have done the greatest disservice to humanity that this world has ever known. And I am running for Congress to try to change this. One voice, I do not carry a magic wand, but one voice that wishes to do it differently. And it is not up to me. It's up to you. Government is not them, it's us. It's who we send there. If you want to send someone to Congress that believes that everybody matters, and that, frankly, a lot less divides us, it really does. Because I'm yet to find these people, these horrible, mean people that we're told about on CNN and Fox News and by the president and by Congress. There are some out there. But for the most part, I've been listening to thousands of people over the last 8 months of all stripes and colors and backgrounds and religions and capacities and interests and perspectives. And boy, we're in a much better place, and I need to remind you of that, of the optimism. So that's how I will do it. I will be that voice of reconciliation. And the word government repair, think about it, to repair. That is why I am running for Congress.
Thank you. We are through with questions, and we have closing comments, 2 minutes each, and we'll start with Mr. Santa Maria, go to Mr. Phillips, and then finish with Mr. Jennings.
I hadn't thought this far into the forum. We've had 5 of these, and I guess I want to say thank you to everybody who's come out here, to everybody who's standing in the back and volunteering for any of these campaigns, and getting involved and doing what we can to get rid of Eric Paulson and to bring good leadership to Washington, and fellow candidates, and you, Ms. Rodriguez, and I think back, the caucuses are 2 weeks, is that right? 2 weeks? And I think back to moving to Minnesota and how welcoming everybody was, and going to my first caucus and stumbling around and thinking, what in the hell is going on? This is the worst way to do democracy. And I never thought at that moment with my wife that a couple years from then I'd be in one of them caucusing for myself. Which I haven't made my mind up yet. I think I might. But I invite you guys to go to my website and go to all our websites and read up on all our issues, see where we stand, and trust, I trust, that no matter who you guys are supporting and who we get behind for this DFL endorsement, that we will be in better hands in a year and a half than we are today. And I'm really grateful for you guys and everyone up here that's making that happen.
Well, I want to thank you, Katie. I want to thank SD34. I want to thank the 2 men beside me, because this is an extraordinary journey that we're all on, and I've been made the better because of you, Adam, and because of you, Brian, and because of Alicia, who dropped out of this race some time ago, but who I believe is going to add a lot of value to all of us and to this community for many years to come. And I want to thank all of you, because this is what matters. The fact that all of you showed up on a night like this, almost a year before the next election, is the most hopeful and optimistic thing I could possibly see. People care. We had a wake-up call in this last election that is meaningful and palpable, and I feel optimistic about the future. I'm a Democrat because I believe in truth. I'm a Democrat because I believe in justice, and I'm a Democrat because I believe in opportunity for all. These are the fundamental principles, I believe, of being a Democrat. I'm a Democrat because I believe in the words of Hubert Humphrey, who said the moral test of government is how it treats those in the dawn of life, in the twilight of life, and in the shadows of life. And I'm a Democrat because of my great-grandfather, J. Phillips, who taught me as a young boy that when you stack money up, it stinks, and when you spread it out, it fertilizes. It fertilizes. It's hard to do that when you have a microphone. And I'll tell you, and I'm hopeful too, because as I look at this room and I listen to Adam and Brian, I recognize that we share values, every one of us, and we also desire the same outcomes. And that leaves me hopeful. I want to see health care for everybody in this country, one way or another. I want to get that done. I want to see people who work hard be paid a livable wage. People who work hard should not live in poverty. We need the strongest public schools in the world. We need to take care of our earth and our rivers and streams, and we can do so. That leaves me hopeful. So that turns my attention to how are we going to beat Eric Paulson in November? I remind you, we live in a purple district. I remind you that we have not elected a Democrat to the seat since 1958. I remind you that only 35% of residents in our district identify themselves as Democrats. We will do so by extending invitations. That's what I am doing. Independents, thoughtful Republicans, Libertarians, Democrats. Let's set the national standards in the 3rd District for how this country will make change, and let's do it together. Thank you. I would love to be your next representative in the U.S. Congress, in the House of Representatives. Thank you, and Godspeed.
Thanks for coming out tonight. You are the reason that we are going to unseat Eric Paulson and take back the House in 2018. Now, I decided to get into this race because I feel like I wasn't hearing the progressive voice that I wanted to hear. I wasn't hearing those things that are facing our nation right now, the solutions to those things. I wasn't hearing the issues that are important to my family and to so many families all across the 3rd District. Now, when I started this, I threw out this stat. I talked about 75 people a day who die simply because they don't have access to health care. Now, after the individual mandate went away in this latest tax bill, that's now over 100 people. We're failing them. We are failing these people, and we have got to stand up and do something. We need to do it right now, and that's why I'm a strong advocate for Medicare for all. You see, because I believe, as Democrats, it's actually our duty as a country to help one another. It's our duty to help one another, and any politician that tells you that we can't get this done is a politician who will ensure that it will never get done. As Democrats, we need to stand up and fight for health care as a right. It's what differentiates us from the Republicans. Now, there is not a fine line between advantage and disadvantage. There is a wide gap, and we need to do everything we can to tirelessly fight with pride against that, because it's what differentiates us from our opponents. We are the party that fights for the poor and the middle class. We are the party that says health care is a right for everyone, that public education is a treasure that needs to be protected. And we need to do everything. I know in order for us to do these things and prove that we can win comes from standing behind our core democratic principles and values. That's how we win. Join me. Let's do what we believe in, and let's fight for what's right. Thank you.
Thank you. I am going to turn it over to Nancy Meyerhoff, our Senate District Chair, but first I want to continue with the gratitude theme, and I want to thank all of you for coming out on a snowy Tuesday. I also want to thank all the volunteers that put this on, and the volunteers that came with the campaigns. That's what democracy looks like. Also, I also want to continue with the hope. The ideas that the candidates shared tonight gave me hope, and frankly, after the events of last year, it feels good to be hopeful again. So how about a big round of applause for all of you?
Thank you to our moderator, Katie Rodriguez, the pride of Senate District 34. Thank you to the candidates. Thank Thank you to the candidates for a spirited and thoughtful discussion. I hope that you learned as much as I did. We in Senate District 34 are pleased to see all of you out tonight supporting our democracy by becoming informed voters. While I have a minute, I would like to introduce DFL candidate for the 34B Minnesota House seat, Kirsten Bonner, who's in the House. Are there any other candidates here that I have missed?
It's not too late.
Come see me. The next step in the election process is to attend your precinct caucus on Tuesday, February 6th. If you live in Maple Grove, Rogers, Dayton, or Osseo, you'll caucus at Maple Grove Senior High. Registration starts at 6:30 p.m. and the meetings are at 7. Registration will be far easier if you know your precinct name and number. Elaine and Carly will look that up for you tonight, or you can go to the Minnesota Secretary of State website and look it up for yourself. We all want to see a big blue wave overtake Eric Paulson in November. Each one of us will have to step out of our comfort zone, talk to people we know, clear out a little time to make that wave happen. If you can volunteer for an hour or two in the next 2 weeks or on February 6th to make your caucus a success, please get in touch with your Senate District Chair. I'll be right over there at the end. Thank you to Congressional District 3 DFL for co-sponsoring this forum and providing this venue. The DFL is funded by donations and the rent was $300 tonight. So if you have a few dollars that you want to help us out with, see Lee and Kyle right back there on your way out. And they would also be happy to tell you how you can loan the party $50 and get it refunded by the state. Visit the candidates tables and the Fair Vote Minnesota table at the back before you go. Thanks for coming. Be safe on the way home. See you on February 6th.